Happy Friday, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Well, do you have trouble concentrating? Do you find it hard to sit still? Do you interrupt others during a conversation or act out impulsively without really thinking things through? At some time we all have, but if it's an everyday occurrence, you may have adult ADHD. Here with some answers, please welcome psychologist Dr. Michael Friedrichs.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Let's first explain what ADHD is.
Well, I think most of us can conjure in our mind an image of what ADHD is in children. We think about like little bears behaving badly with party hats on, you know. But that wasn't always the case. People didn't know what it was. At the turn of the century, when the schools introduced standardized education, they noticed that certain kids who should otherwise be behaving well were behaving badly. By the 1930s, they introduced stimulants. They found out, wow, stimulants make these kids better. They call it a paradoxical effect. That's actually counterintuitive. If you give a stimulant to a bad kid, he'll get better. 1956, we get Ritalin. 1980, the term ADD. The way it stands now, ADHD, which is what it's called now, is the most studied, funded childhood disorder. What's new is the idea that adults can have it as well.
And ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder.
Yes,
okay.
Yes, specifically in children.
And how do you recognize adult ADHD?
Well, what's interesting is we weren't really looking for it. We were actually considered a childhood disorder. What we didn't know was that only 1/3 of kids outgrow ADHD. So that means that if you look at the demographics, 8% of kids have ADHD. That means 5% of adults may have it. That's 1 in 20 people that you know may still be suffering from ADHD.
So we mentioned some symptoms possibly, which would be, do you have trouble concentrating, find it hard to sit still? As a doctor, what do you say to look out for?
Well, I think it's very important to point out that the hyperactivity tends to burn off by the time you're an adult.
Okay.
So what you get is the inattentive piece, which is really, really huge. You can have a little or you can have a lot. If you have a lot, it ends up being a tremendous disability, and mainly because your biography becomes your biology. So I can give some statistics. 40%, for example, of young adults are going to be in a car accident if they have ADHD, compared to 6% of normals. Or 20% of people with gambling disorder, like an addiction, have ADHD. And get this, 45% of people in prison have ADHD. So you see it ends up being a very serious disorder.
Okay, so the addiction part of it is fascinating, and I'm sure that has to do with ending up in prison.
Impulsivity.
So again, though, if I'm an adult, and I would think there are a lot of, my mother thinks she has ADHD. I think she just isn't paying attention, but that's just me. So you tell me, what do we look for? Because other people probably recognize it before the person does.
Yeah, almost always, and it's kind of funny. So it's kind of counterintuitive, actually. The best indicator that you have ADHD, believe it or not, is that you really think you might. Believe it or not.
Okay.
Those people tend to do a lot of research on the internet. They worry about it. By the time someone calls me, there may well be something wrong. Also, your spouse. If your spouse thinks you have it, you might want to get screened for it. Believe it or not, because then sometimes people have ADHD. They have a personality they've built around it, what I call a failure personality. Because if it's undiagnosed, they go for years and years and years of sort of being told. What they hear a lot is, why don't you work up to your potential, you know? And there's a lot of failure about it. So they often end up doing things like small engine repair. They can be super genius. Entertainment. There's a lot of them in the entertainment industry.
Well, I would think in this business there are a lot of people, because there's so many things going on that it kind of feeds that need to have a lot of things distracting you.
Well, what they look, point of performance rewards. So I go out, I shoot that scene, I check it off my list. That's something that adults with ADHD can do very, very well. But the problem really with ADHD is, above and beyond anything else, it's a disorder of executive functioning. That is long-term planning. I want to learn how to play piano, so I'm going to practice every day. It's that kind of stuff.
So we mentioned that they don't have follow-through. So are you saying that someone can't person with ADHD will not have the follow-through to get that done?
What we have to understand is that it's not a disease in any conventional way. What it basically is, there's brain differences. Everyone has brain differences. If you've ever picked strawberries, you know no two strawberries that look the same. Our brains are the same way. But there are normal differences and there are abnormal differences. Abnormal differences, things like genetics, something called teratogens in utero exposed to mother smoking or toxins in the environment. Half these people have learning disabilities as well. So those disabilities show up mainly in 4 brain areas, and it's worth pointing out. There's persistence, that is, pursuing a task, staying on target, getting it done. Then there's resistance. You may have seen the Disney movie with the dog as a squirrel.
Yeah.
You know, that ends up being a huge problem. And then there's working memory. If you can't remember that you were doing something, return to the task. Oh yeah, we're on TV, let's do this. And then again, executive functioning, the ability to plan.
Is there something, can adults then take like Ritalin?
Yeah.
Would it work for them?
Well, we know,
is there a treatment?
I want to be very clear. I'm not a drug pusher. Even as a doctor, I don't do it. I don't even use drugs. I don't like NutraSweet. ADHD meds, however, are one of the most effective, simple treatments. We have seen miracles at New Leaf's Clinic.
Really?
But of course, getting the proper diagnosis is key, because I think the public is fair in leveling a lot of criticism against us doctors for not doing our due diligence and making sure that we've diagnosed the correct thing. I want to say this. If you have been told you have bipolar disorder, and you really don't believe it, and you've taken the meds all those years and you're not sure, you might have adult ADHD, and since it's a new ID, you might want to get screened.
Are there alternative treatments to, say, Ritalin? So alternative to a drug?
I'm glad you asked that. There's a simple mantra. Daily exercise has been shown in research to be as powerful as a light dose of Ritalin.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also diet. You want to have high protein foods like legumes, eggs, that sort of thing. And you also want to avoid high glycemic foods like that pumpkin spice latte that I drank this morning. So that I could do this interview, but by noon I'm going to be asleep on my office floor.
You said no NutraSweet, but you have the caffeine.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone improves on caffeine.
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
research shows.
We're going to put the information on our website, and there is an online test that you can take to find out or see if you have.
And we do
any
screenings
symptoms.
at New Leaf's Clinic, and we use computerized methods. It's pretty
Awesome.
pretty tight.
Put information on K2.com. Thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank
Always
you.
good to see you.